Welcome, YouTube. This is Steam Shouter here with, what's up with my voice? We got someone else to do my voice? Where did we get the budget for that? Oh, okay then. Well, here's a special thanks to Shelvacu for agreeing to be my new voice. Back on track, however, welcome to another episode of A Pony Perspective. I just want to thank everyone who watched my first episode. I am really happy to be making another. If this is your first time watching this series, I recommend viewing my first episode, where I go over all the background information about this series. I'm too lazy to review it all over again. Now then, let's dive in. For most of its history, the United States of America has enjoyed its relative isolation from the rest of the world. By this, I mean the US has really had no real threats to its sovereignty, unlike Europe or even Asia. However, what if I told you that not too long ago, there was a secret plan to invade the US? No, I'm not talking about them. Go back further. Too far! You're getting warmer. Close enough. Yes, the Germans did have a plan to invade America. However, I'm not talking about during World War II. You might now be thinking about during World War I. I'm not talking about that either. Believe it or not, Imperial Germany had a plan to invade America before World War I, even prior to the 20th century. Just hear me out. Between 1897 and 1903, the German Emperor Kaiser Wilhelm II had 3 separate invasion plans of the US drawn up. Of course, they were never carried out, but some of you might be wondering, why have we never heard of these plans before? Well, these plans only became public in 2002 when they were rediscovered in the German military archives in Freiburg. By that point, I doubt few people actually cared, so this interesting chapter of history has been largely swept under the rug. However, for the purposes of this video, let's resurrect this tantalizing scenario. Unfortunately, there isn't as much information about this topic out there as I would like, but I will do my best to cover it. With all that out of the way, let's dive in. The first question you're probably thinking is, why would Germany want to invade the United States? Well, some part of it may have had to do with the fundamental differences between the two nations. Some sources indicate that the German monarch had a quote-unquote near-pathological hatred for the United States, its democracy, and its capitalist system, which they saw as corrupt and decadent. Considering Germany was an autocracy relying on tradition, this view may hold some water. However, this alone would not explain or justify an invasion of the US. Here is the main reason, as far as I can tell. Germany was a latecomer to the Empire race, which was well underway by the time Germany unified in 1871 after the Franco-Prussian War. At the time of its unification, Chancellor Otto von Bismarck was using a policy of Realpolitik. Basically, it was a practical means to position Germany as a mediator of European affairs. Granted, I wish they had kept that policy, but that is a discussion for another day. Long story short, Kaiser Wilhelm II came to power, kicked Bismarck out of power, and adopted the military, aggressive, and opportunistic Weltpolitik as a way to expand the German Empire into a world power. How would they do this? Well, the only way to do that would be to create a large overseas empire to increase their power and wealth. Basically, if the world was a cake, Germany wanted its own slice. However, there was one problem. Most of the world was already under control by other Western powers, roughly 87%. Risking a war with other European powers about overseas colonies would certainly result in their defeat. There was only 2 major areas of the world that remained uncolonized, Latin America and the Pacific. However, Germany faced one problem: the United States. In the early 19th century, the US established the Monroe Doctrine, basically forbidding any European nations from interfering in Latin American affairs, thus trying to keep Latin America to themselves. In addition, Germany had no viable access to the Pacific Ocean. If they wanted to create their own overseas empire, they would have to establish bases in Latin America, thus creating a launching point to have unhindered access to the Pacific Ocean. At this time, America's influence in both of these regions was increasing. The German Kaiser basically wanted to intervene in the situation before it was too late and replace the US with German economic power in these regions. Now that we have gone over why Germany wanted to attack the US, let's talk about how they planned to do it. Before I go on, I should mention, Germany did not plan on conquering America. It was merely an attack to force the US to bargain from a weak position, to sever its growing economic and political connections in the Pacific, the Caribbean, and South America, and to increase Germany's influence in those places. Okay then, with that clarification out of the way, let's dive in. Germany's first plan was to attack America's naval power on the East Coast and thus gain a free hand to establish a German naval base in the Caribbean, either Cuba or Puerto Rico, and to negotiate for another base in the Pacific. The plans were drawn up between 1897 and 1898 by Naval Lieutenant Eberhard von Manty. Don't we have a better image? Oh, okay then. The plans were then most likely guided and approved by Alfred von Tirpitz, the newly appointed Navy Secretary. With support from the Kaiser, Tirpitz formed a plan to create a navy worthy of Germany's imperial ambitions, called the Tirpitz Plan. This plan sought to build the second largest navy in the world after the United Kingdom. Basically, the Kaiser heavily supported the expansion of the German navy. Where was I? Oh yes. The first stage of the plan called for a great German fleet to sail across the Atlantic Ocean and to engage and defeat the U.S. Navy's Atlantic Fleet in a major battle. Then, the German naval artillery would be directed on the Norfolk Naval Shipyard, the Newport News Shipbuilding Center, and other naval resources in the Hampton Roads area of Virginia. Manti called this the most sensitive point of the American defenses. Once these were dealt with, Germany could establish a naval blockade. At this point, a German negotiating team would have been sent in, armed with the Kaiser's demands. However, developments occurred that obstructed this plan. First off, Germany just didn't have the ships necessary to pull this off. The Kaiser found it difficult to fund the expensive ships he wished for. Plans to develop certain ships needed were delayed or shelved. Also, the Spanish-American War broke out in 1898, with the U.S. in action in the Caribbean and the Pacific. This resulted in increased American activity in the Caribbean and Pacific. America gained further territory and influence in both regions. This of course put a damper on the Kaiser's plans. However, the Kaiser would not be so easily dissuaded from his dreams of a grand German overseas empire. However, if you thought the first plan wasn't ambitious enough, the Kaiser's second plan, called Plan 2, certainly made up for it. In 1899, the Kaiser ordered Manti to redraw the plans. This new plan was ambitious, to put it kindly. It called for a two-pronged land invasion against Boston and New York City. This unprecedented invasion would require 60 warships, about 60 cargo and troop ships carrying 75,000 tons of coal, 100,000 soldiers, and a lot of artillery. This force would traverse the Atlantic in 25 days. The plan called for a massive naval battle to acquire superiority over American ships. German troops, armed with artillery, were to make an ambitious landing at Cape Cod. These ground forces would then advance to Boston and fire shells into the city. For the attack on New York, German troops were to land on the island of Sandy Hook, New Jersey, while warships pounded away at harbor fortifications, including Fort Hamilton and Fort Tompkins. Following this, the warships would advance to shell Manhattan and other areas of New York to induce panic among civilians. By December of 1900, however, the Kaiser realized carrying out such a venture from Germany was unfeasible. He then decided Plan 2 would be carried out best from a base on Cuba. This alarmed his own general staff, since such a base would first need to be taken by force. Admiral Otto von Diederich reported to the Kaiser that the German navy was now stronger than the U.S. Navy, so it was up to the army to solve the problem of the land strategy. However, General Alfred von Schlieffen, the author of the famous World War I plan that bore his name, was doubtful of the whole venture. He told the Kaiser that 100,000 troops would probably be enough to take Boston, but that many more troops would be required to take New York, a city of 3 million at the time. Von Diederich thought that von Schlieffen was being very clever with the Kaiser, offering a seemingly positive answer that was impossible to carry out, as there was not enough German shipping to carry 100,000 troops and their supply. Okay then, let's talk about the third plan. What? We're out of time. Oh, okay then. Well, it looks like I will have to stop here for now. If you want to learn more about Germany's plan to invade America along with my speculations on the topic, please join me for part 2.